This is lesson 6.2. We're going to talk about patterns and some of the different ways to use patterns, defining patterns, creating patterns in Adobe Illustrator. And we'll also do some other things that are similar to patterns that I've kind of skipped over. You may have noticed if you've looked at some of the tools that have been in some of the other, in the panels and the flyout areas. Why didn't I discuss them? Well, they kind of more lend themselves to this patterns lesson topic. So we'll go over them and we'll discuss that all right now. So working with patterns, you need two things. You need to have your swatches open, which I have right here. And then you also need a shape of some sort. So let's go with the M for rectangle tool, and I will make a nice big rectangle here in the middle of the artboard. Make sure I have default colors, and I'll start with the fill as my active color. So on the swatches panel, you have your solid colors, you have gradients, and then you also have patterns, and these are the two that are default shipped with Adobe Illustrator CC 2015. I will show you how we can edit these patterns and create our own patterns to get the look that we're going for. So as you can see, we have this shape here, this pattern that repeats, and we can compare that with this other pattern which also repeats. But these are great and wonderful. Let's see how we can make our own pattern first. Let's jump right into that. So let's define our fill as the default fill and stroke as the default, and move this down out of the way. And we will use this to display our pattern as we go through it. Let's grab the star tool and create a star, holding down Shift and constraining to regular triangles, holding down also the Alt key. And so now I've got a nice star shape. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to make it a whole lot smaller. Let's go with this new one, put it right there. Let's do a red fill on that, and let's do another one down there, and another one over here, but even smaller. Okay, now I've got these three stars. I'm going to actually take off that stroke because I don't like it there. Okay, so in order to make a pattern, it's super easy. You will select your shape or combination of shapes that you want to make a pattern and just drag it to your swatches. So now I have this new swatch created, and it says new pattern swatch. We can edit it, we can apply it to our artwork, and I'll show you how to do that. Just make sure you have your whatever object you want to fill that with, and just click on the swatch. You can also fill it to a stroke, but for that we're going to need to up that size a little bit. Let me take off the there we go. So now we kind of have this star border, and that is kind of a cool effect. So that is how you apply your swatch, your pattern, to your artwork. Now we want to customize it. Let's look at customizing a pattern. The easy way to do that is to grab that pattern and just drag it to your artboard, and you'll see some things. Look at our original, and then look at this pattern swatch that we just pulled from the swatches panel. So it looks pretty much the same. However, let's go to outline mode and I'll show you something there. So outline mode is Command Y on a Mac, Control Y on a PC, and you can see that the artwork, the outline shows the original artwork has no box around it, and the swatch has this transparent, no stroke, no fill. Let's click on it if we can. There we go. Isolate it. No stroke and no fill square around that. So while that is selected, go back to preview mode, and let's just change the size here and see what we can do with that. Let's drag it this way and this way, and then we'll exit isolation mode and go back to preview mode. And now this is our new swatch. It's the same swatch, but in order for that to apply to the swatch that we have in our swatches, our pattern, we have to drag it over there, and you see that it turns to the add swatch icon. Well, hold down Alt or Option and hover over that previous swatch, and what it'll do, it changes to that hand shape with a plus. So we have it's kind of a modify icon. I'm gonna see if I can't zoom in here on this part, simply because it's hard to see when it takes effect. You see I have the white star, or the white field with the blue star on it, and as I drag the mouse over the top of that, you can see there's a black outline, and when it changes to the black outline, then you know that you're applying this new artwork to that pattern. And you can see here in this the resulting extra shape around the outside, or the extra white space in that shape around the outside of the artwork. Alright, so what else can we do to edit our pattern? Well, let's take a look. Let's double click on that and we get the pattern options panel. We can rename it. So I'll call it blue / or hyphen red stars. And now you can look at the tile type. So is it a grid, which means just what you see, it's got the different shapes in a grid pattern, rows and columns. You can do brick by row, and for that you see that it offsets, based on, like you would imagine bricks would be laid out. You can do brick by column, and so that offsets vertically. You can do hex by column, and you can see that our shape changed to a hex shape, and now the hex pattern, or the pattern, is kind of offset as though it were inside of this hexagon shape. You can do hex by row. So there are a couple of different ways that you can do that. I'll go back to grid. Actually, I want to choose one of these brick options, because the next setting, you need to have either brick by row or brick by column, and I'll show you why. So brick by row is what I'll use here, and that's again horizontal rows. And then you can choose the offset. So is it a third of the brick, a fourth of the brick, half the brick, 2/3, and so forth, excuse me. And that way you can change the alignment as it's offset, and so you can do that also with the vertical, or I mean brick by column option. Okay, then you can change the width, and you can maintain height and width proportions just by clicking that or unclicking it. So you can change the pattern, make it smaller, and that just changes the focus size of the pattern itself. So if you choose size tile to art, it'll go based on that. You can move tile with art, and that will move the tile with the art as you go. And then you can also do if you do size tile to art, you can do spacing. So let's put some spacing around it. And as you can see, this is where you define how big the spacing is around each piece of the artwork. You can have overlap, vertical and top in. So this is if it's closer. Let's move it closer to go like 15 point. No, we need to go a little closer than that even. Let's go -40. There we go. Now we'll get some overlap. So we have some overlap here. You can do left in front, right in front. We need a little bit more here. Yeah, now you can see there's some overlap. So you can change whether it's left in front or right in front. So watch right here when we have things that are going from left to right. And now we see that our star that was in the back changes, this one here. So left in front, right in front, and you can go bottom in front or top in front. And so anywhere there's an overlap, you can see where that changes right here. The one in the bottom is on top of, in front of the one above it. Okay. So if we go even further, it's more pronounced. So that's the overlap. You can change the number of copies just in this preview. You can dim the copies so you can see where your artwork is, so you can work with it. You can show the tile edge, which is this box around here. And you can show the swatch bounds, which is this right here. So there's all of these different settings that you can work with to find the best way to space and align and modify your pattern. I think I like that, nice and spread out. Maybe not that far. Oh, that's why, because I wanted. There we go. And then when you're all done, you simply can close this or hit the save a copy, or you can click done up here. And then there's also the pattern tile tool. So within the pattern tile tool, you have this bounding box that kind of shows what your pattern tile is going to look like, and you can adjust the height and width. And then you'll notice on here these little diamond shapes, and this is the brick offset. So you can drag it and you can see that it changes based on the set positions that you can move your brick offset, and you can do it from either side, and it reflects on the other side, and it also reflects here in the options box. So that is the pattern tile tool that you can use. One thing you'll notice with patterns, let's click done here, and that will close us out of that. So let's get rid of this, and we'll have this here. We'll get rid of this one as well. And one thing you'll note is when you change the size of your artwork that has the pattern in it, it will just adjust around where that pattern is. And so you can see I'm either cutting off or adding to the stars that are in this pattern. One other thing that you'll notice, let's create a new rectangle and give it the default colors, but swap those colors and send it to the back. You'll see that the pattern didn't have any background to it. So if I move that around or resize that, you know, it doesn't matter. I still have the black background that's coming from this rectangle that I had behind it. Now if you want to have a background color in your pattern itself, well, that's easy. Just go to your pattern creator, enter isolation mode, get your pattern, or that filled. Okay, so let's move this rectangle. That's probably a bad color with these. There we go. All right, and so exit out of that and then drag that pattern back on. And remember, we need to see, I was holding down Control, I need to hold down Alt. We need to see that black border. There we go. And now our pattern has a yellow background that we just added to it. So keep that in mind if you've got a pattern that you just created and it does or doesn't have the background that you wanted. Make sure that what you selected first has the background or does not have a background so that you can use that in the pattern. Okay? So there's a couple other things to be concerned about with patterns, and I'll show them to you right now. I'll clear that off my screen, go with the default colors and the rectangle tool, and I will make a rectangle here. I'm going to add a gradient to it. I'm going to change that gradient to go vertically this way, and what we're going to do is make a very, very small gradient tile, and I'm going to show you some of the limitations with the pattern tool here in Illustrator. So let's get the V for the selection tool and make it so very, very small. 14 point at this needs to be zoomed in, and we'll keep going down. It looks like 2 point. Let's go, that's less than 1 point. Still zooming in, and let's go to 0.1 points. I think I'm probably a little smaller than that. Where's my info panel? It says 0.111, so let's go 0.0 and maintain. Oops, that didn't work. 0.1. Okay, so now it's constrained to 0.1 points. So 1/10 of a pencil tip. Super small. So if we want to use this to create our pattern, we really need to be zoomed in, and we can drag that over here to be our pattern. However, let's zoom out a little bit, grab our rectangle tool, and we will fill it with that pattern. That's fine. It looks great. There's no, issues with that pattern this way. Okay, let's delete it, or delete our fill. Click on that. Let's go switch to the stroke, remove the stroke, and then we're going to do something interesting. We're going to change the size to a taller size. And we had this problem in class. We were trying to make a kind of a carbon fiber look. All right, so we've got this gradient in here. Let's modify the gradient. Let's switch to the fill color. So we're on the, let's go a little bit darker than, yeah, probably 20% is good. And we need a nice thick black in between each of the specks, or the fibers, the carbon fibers. Let's go 35 instead. There we go. All right, so we have that, and then in order to make it look right, we kind of offset. Well, let's see. See what this did. Well, that's all right. So let's double click our tile, and here's the problem. We've got the spacing. So how do we make sure that we don't have all of this white space in between? Well, we can change it to 0 by 0. Nope, that's not good enough. So let's do size tile to art and see if we can lower our spacing this way. Nope, that's not getting it. See if we can go to the type tool. No, it appears to be we're as small as we can get this. So how do we get our tile to better match that small space? So as you look at this, we'll go back out of here and we'll turn off the size tile to art, and we'll try to make this smaller. And you can see that the smallest size we can go is 2 point by 2 point. So whatever we do with our artwork, it has to fit within this 2 point by 2 point square. And that is, well, not this one. This is the tile edge, and this is the swatch bounds. So it needs to stay within that tile edge and also within the swatch bounds. So let's see if we can fit. I forgot. I'm working within the tool. So let's click done, and we'll go over here to our piece of artwork, and we'll grab the rectangle tool, and we'll click and go 2 point by 2 point, and there it is. Let's give it no fill and no stroke, and then we can go to outline mode, and we'll just simply move our gradient inside of that. And so we'll slide a copy. Whoops, that bumped a little bit. So that's right next to it. Maintain that constraint so that it's just offset from there. And then I can make a copy of that. And make sure that we're keeping it along that horizontal. And there we go. We have that all the way across, and then we can fill it all the way down. And I'm just working in outline mode because then I can see the boundary of each of these boxes. Okay, now I have a little bit of an issue. The scale, or the dimensions of our little gradients are such that they do not align with the bottom of the box, but it's less than a point, and so I'm just going to resize it so I can get it to snap to that point right there. That's not doing it. Really need to move in. Try it with the mouse rather than my stylus, and I think that's it. Okay, then we'll go back to preview mode, and I will use this as my swatch. Oops, let's escape out of there. See what it's doing. So now it adds the white space in between the top boxes or rectangles and the bottom rectangles, and I don't want that. So I'm going to double click my pattern and see if I can't get that to adjust. There we go. And now as long as I keep it on grid, then I won't have any weird adjustment vertically or horizontally. So I'll click done there. And now you see we have a perfect tile of this carbon fiber effect. And of course, with carbon fiber, there are different patterns and weaves that you could use. So this is just one example of doing it. And if you want to adjust that, the vertical spacing of the rectangles in that, go ahead, and you'll have to manipulate and change the way that it looks on your computer. Let's make this bigger so we can see how it looks. And I think that's a pretty good, well, now it's so small you can't see it. But it is carbon fiber, which has a very small footprint to it. So you can change that scale based on whatever you need to apply your pattern to. Again, this is a very, very small 2-point by 2-point. I'm still zoomed in at 3200%, and that square that filled up the screen is so small right there. But that's what happens when we're working with vector. If I want to make it bigger, I can make a copy. I can resize that, and that gives me a bigger pattern to work with as my base. And then I'll double click that and make sure to adjust. Oops. So that they are the same height and width. What happened? I thought I had it. There it is. So that's just one example of a carbon fiber pattern that you could use that repeats, and you could make it bigger or smaller depending on the application that you're looking for, or the use that you're looking for, and customize it to your own needs. Okay, at the beginning I told you we were going to do some other things that were not exactly related to patterns, but they may be useful for you. I'm going to go to fit the artboard within the window. I'm going to select all, and I'm going to delete it. And we're going to come over to the line segment tool and pull that out so that we get the rectangular grid tool. And it creates what appears to be a pattern because we can create a rectangular grid. And if you just drag it, you'll create this grid. And then, of course, you can select the stroke weight and change the color of your stroke and anything that you can do to align. So there's that, and yours may look different. If you've already used it at a previous time, you may have a different number of cells, rows and columns. As you are dragging, you can hold down Shift to constrain it to square. You can hold down Alt to constrain it to expand from the center. You can hold down Shift and Alt to hold the constraint and expand from center at the same time, just like the other line tools and the shape tools that we've discussed already. One other thing that you can do is, as you are expanding, you can hold down or click the up and down arrows to add vertical rows. You see that the rows are increasing or decreasing as I go up and down. And if you want more columns, then it's left and right. Right to have more, left to have fewer, down to have fewer rows, up to have more rows, and so you can get to the ones that you're looking for. The other way you can do it is simply click. Whoops, excuse me, that didn't work. And it will give you the rectangular grid tool options, and you can add the number of horizontal dividers or vertical dividers and change all of the size and dimensions right there. The other thing you can do is double click, and that'll still give you the same thing. Okay, so that is the rectangular grid tool. May be useful if you want to put lines or boxes in your artwork, and then you can manipulate them as you need. The other thing to do once you have created that is you can, of course, select individual lines using the direct selection tool, and you can move those around as you need. You can select individual points and manipulate them just like the ends or the points on a line segment, and you can manipulate your grid that way. It's fully editable in that sense. Also, if you ungroup, then you have access to each of the individual pieces of your grid as separate objects. And again, ungroup is Command-Shift-G on a Mac, Control-Shift-G on a PC, and I'm going to delete all of that. So there's that tool. Also on that same flyout with the rectangular grid tool is the spiral tool, and spirals are just plain fun. Let's give that one a no fill, but a black stroke. There we go. So as you see, it's got some shape to it. It has these anchor points on it, and we'll discuss what you can do with your spiral. So first, let's click the just click somewhere on the screen with the spiral tool to get the spiral options panel here. You'll notice that it has 3 things that you can change the numbers of, the values of, and then also these 2 direction things. So radius, decay, segments, and style. Style is basically clockwise or counterclockwise, anti-clockwise for you Brits. So this is the direction the spiral is going to go, and that's useful if you have one that you need to have opposite but varying just a little bit. Instead of making a copy or reflecting it, you will just grab this other one, and anyway, so you can modify those. Radius and decay and segments. Let's show you how those work, and there are also modifier keys on the finger dance. So if you're paying attention to the finger dance modifiers, the spiral tool also has some, and we'll discuss them here shortly. So let's just click OK, and we put a spiral where I clicked, and now it looks pretty neat. So let's discuss what we can do to change the spirals. So I'm going to click here and start to drag, and you can see that anywhere I drag, I'm pulling from that center point to a new point. I can go bigger, smaller, anywhere I would like. So the modifiers for the spiral tool are, if you hold down Shift, it will constrain the orientation of your spiral either on the vertical, the diagonal, or the horizontal axes, just like the other tools that we've discussed. And as you go around, you can see it snap to those diagonal or vertical or horizontal axes. Okay? Let's move that aside. Actually, let's just delete it. We'll delete the other one so it's not in the way either. And again, with the spiral tool, whenever you click, it takes the last spiral that you created. So there it is. If I make a smaller one and then click, it's going to be that smaller size spiral. Okay? I'm going to Command and select and delete all of those. Alright, so Shift will constrain to those diagonals. The other modifiers that we can use go over to the arrow keys. And as you tap the arrow keys down, get my keyboard so it's not bouncing here. As you tap them down, you have fewer segments. Now I just have one segment. There's 2, 3, 4. And you can make your curl, your spiral go in or not as far just by up and down on the arrow keys. Okay? So again, Shift constrains on the horizontal and diagonals and vertical, and the arrow keys will add or take away the segments. And the segment is from each anchor point to the next. So this is one segment here, one segment here, one segment here, and so forth. Alright, that was a mistake. Okay, the other functions that you can do, and this will help explain the decay that was on our spiral options panel that popped up when we click. So if you hold down Command and drag your spiral in you're going to increase, as you drag it in, you increase the decay. And you'll get to a point where it's going to be at 100%, which will just look like a circle. And you don't know that it's at 100%, but just trust me, I'm going to tell you as we make more spirals. As you get closer to 100%, it's a circle, and if you go outside of or farther than 100%, then you're going to have a spiral that is spiraling outside of the point that you have. As you go farther out, you reduce the decay closer toward 0. Okay? And I'll show you what I mean by that. Alright. So if we have a spiral, and I'll just click here and create one, and let's say it has 100% decay. As I told you just previously, it will make a perfect circle. And it'll have all of these segments going around in that circle until it reaches the end of the spiral. We can do 90, and I'll show you the difference. 90 means that within, let me get a rectangle tool here, and I will make a square constrained on that point. Let's give it a blue stroke. Alright, let's thicken up that stroke. It's kind of thin here. Alright, so you can see the difference. Let's make a copy of this square. Okay, so this spiral has 100% decay, is what it's called. From this point, move this out of the way, from this point to here, and if we reduce this square, okay, we're going to scale it down by 90%. We should get a square that aligns with the next segment on this spiral. So each segment is going to decay 90% of the size of the original. And go back to this one. As you can tell, each segment is going to decay to 100% the size of the previous, and if you go from 100% through, you're just going to make a circle, if that makes sense. So again, let's take this one and drag it back over here and scale it to 90%, and we will realign it, and you can see that those points are there along that 90%. Let's do another one, and we'll do that another 90%, and so this one is 90% the size of this one. And so as we drag it to align there, we can see that that's where that next point on the spiral hits, and it'll go all the way around, each one getting 90% smaller arc as it goes around the spiral. Okay, so that's the decay. And again, 100% will make the 100%, each segment will be 100% of the size of the previous segment, so therefore it's a circle. And as you go around anything smaller, it will reduce, and so then you'll see that inward spiral. If, of course, we had a spiral, excuse me, I didn't want to select that too. If we had a spiral that was 100% or greater than 100% the scale, so say 110, it would start to go from here to there, and then the next one would come out to there, except that would be expanded 110%. And so let's align that. And let's do the next one. And that would be 110%. And align that. So by the time it came from here all the way around, the spiral would end up here. Let's go back to our spiral tool and just test that hypothesis. Instead of 90, let's go 110. And give that the default again with no fill. And so we will drag that point so that it matches this one, and it matches that one, and it matches, well, pretty close. I'm off a little bit. There we go. And so it lines up there, and lines up there, and lines up there, so that all the way around we know that we have hit 110%. And you see that by this larger spiral. Okay? So that's what the decay is. And again, segments are from one point to the next around each arc of the spiral. Okay? So that is the spiral tool. Hopefully you'll find one that or a setting that you'll like as you're working with, say, creating your own spirals. So that was obviously decay and segments and the orientation, counterclockwise or clockwise. Obviously, to change the radius, simply drag farther from the point, and you'll have a bigger radius of your spiral. So again, arrow points will increase segments or decrease segments. Control or command will decrease as you pull away, or increase as you pull in the decay of the spiral. And shift will constrain that spiral on the horizontal and vertical and diagonal axes. All right, so there's your spirals. All right, so let's combine some of these skills that we've just learned. Fit the artboard to the window, delete this spiral. Let's create a, right there, let's constrain it to that point. Oh, you know what I need to do? I need to remove some of those. Actually, segments are fine. I need to change my decay. Less decay. Right there. Hold it to the, I need it right there. Okay. And then we will increase the stroke. And let's change the stroke to that. No, I want the opposite. I want this one. No, I did want that one. Okay. So now I have a stroke that starts thin and gets fatter and then ends fairly thin. Let's change this to a, let's see, how about a pink, like a light pink stroke? Yep, that'll work. Okay. And actually I'm going to make that a little bit smaller. Get my ellipse tool. Find a good center point, about right there. And that should be good. And for that, I want it black. And I want it in back. I actually want it bigger. I want it to go to the edge of that point. There we go. Okay. So now I can add my spiral and my ellipse. And I want to next make a copy of that. And I'm going to constrain that and hold it next to there. And this time we'll change the stroke to a minty green and the background to a maybe an off-white blue. Whoops, that didn't work. Why? Because I had the wrong, so I'll just flip it. Okay, I've got those two. Let's add another one. And this one we'll do fire engine red. With a bright orangish yellow stroke. And then we'll copy these and come down, straight down, but then offset to the halfway point. Whoops, that wasn't it. Offset to there. I want it like right there. That's where it needs to be. And then bump those up. Okay, this one, let's change to a kind of a plum. No, I want to do the color first. How about a nice, there we go. And then we'll do the stroke as a nice plum color. Let's change this one to lemon yellow. Again, I did the wrong. There we go. And how about a nice dark green? And this one, you know what? Instead of green, let's go with a brown there. There we go. This one we will make kind of a, no, it's too dark. Right there. And seafoam green with no stroke. Okay. So now I have all of these colors, these colored swirls, and I want to create a pattern with them. So I will drag that over as a pattern, and I will take that and scooch it out of the way. Yes, I said scooch. And then we will double click to open our pattern options, and let's go brick by row, and let's size tile to art, and let's do, oh, some random number like 286 points negative. Oh, what do you know, that works. Okay, I cheated. And then we'll hit done, and then we'll grab our marquee tool, make sure that our colors are appropriately selected, and make a big pattern of our swirls. Look at that. What do you know? I've got a swirl, I've got a pattern, and I've created this thing all by what we learned just today. Well, the ellipse tool also added on to that, and some colors. Okay, fine. I made this cool pattern with everything we've learned so far in the class. You can see there are a few little problems. One is the overlap is not happening on these other shapes here. We only have the interlocking kind of effect with those ones. So let's double click, and let's do, instead of brick by row, let's do grid, and let's also move that to negative 286. Nope, too much. Let's do half that. What's that gonna be? 143? Well, still not enough. Let's whoops. Let's go to negative 71, 72. That's pretty close. I think I might want to go just a little bit more. Okay, all right. And then we'll click done. And now that is more of what we're looking for. So I made a cool swirling peppermint kind of background. And one thing I might want to do to modify the pattern in the future is to change so that the orientation of the swirls is not so permanent, or not permanent, but repetitive. Maybe do these in different random directions. So anyway, there is something cool that you can create using just what we've learned today and so far in the class. So have fun with Adobe Illustrator, and I thank you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.